bases dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down here. It's a Monday. It's June 22nd, and there's a ton of things to get into across the MLS world, NWSL world, American soccer world as a whole. Also, what's going on in Europe. We had the busiest weekend in the Premier League since they've been back. Lots of different things to get into. John, where do you want to start today? What did Miguel Almiron do? He played. He played well. This is not a surprise. You act like this is news. That's better. Yeah, that's the news. I thought he kicked the ground. I thought he. Oh, I thought he took a chunk out like he was trying to chip one in from about 100 yards and completely misdialing it up. Oh, maybe. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It sucked. Whatever it was, it sucked. All right, you can't decide, so we're going to start with this. This happened 34 years ago today. I don't care if you speak Spanish or not. You're going to know what this is in a second.
Que lo narró así en directo.
Ahí la tiene Maradona, lo marcan dos, pisa la pelota Maradona, arranca por la derecha el genio del fútbol mundial, y es el tercero a tocar para Borruchaga, siempre Maradona, genio, 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 ¡gol!
That's a radio call, folks. That was the greatest goal in World Cup history, the Diego Maradona goal against England, and no, it's not funny. I mean, that's the thing. It's like there's nothing funny about that. That's passion. It's saying he wants to cry. Like, that's real. That's real. That's not playing it for laughs, you know? Like, that is 100% real, and that was an amazing moment. Victor Morales was the commentator, legendary radio commentator in Argentina, and that's the goal. I mean, when we were at the Estadio Azteca for training, I wanted to go to the spot that I thought he shot from. That was like the first place I wanted to go on the field. Was I wanted to go to that spot and just take a look at it. I mean, there's nothing there because the genius wasn't there, because the genius happened in the match. But just that moment, that's why we all talk about this and do this. You know, that moments like that. And that kind of reaction, that's real. That's amazing. And that happened 34 years ago today. And yeah, there was another goal that happened 34 years ago today too, and that was a whole different scenario of Diego Maradona's character, and that happened as well. Punched the ball in over Peter Shilton, who closed his eyes with both hands coming out. Referees somehow missed it. VAR would have caught that one, that's for sure. So, yeah, that's Diego Maradona. I think somebody said it in either the Maradona documentary or something else, like that. God, I can't remember how far apart those goals were. Let's say 30 minutes, just in general. That 30 minutes encapsulated his life. I mean, he was capable of moments of incredible brilliance on the field, and he was also a cheat and had questionable things in his mind about following rules and such. And he would always try to, I think they call it viveza. It's like cunning. He would always try to find a way to bend the rules or get away with breaking them and nobody seeing it. And that was also part of the culture that he grew up in. And he balanced those two things for a long time, as well as any athlete has in that time. But now there's all kinds of craziness around Diego Maradona. He is still at Gimnasia. There is reportedly some kind of feud going on. I don't know the details between him and his ex-wife and his daughters as well. And it's just classic Diego. It's what happens to the guy. It's sad if you grew up as a fan. It's sad if you love what he did on the field, because he's not really that anymore. Every once in a while you see a glimpse of just something that feels like human and normal, but most of the time it's soap opera drama. And a day like this 34 years ago today, this is a day in Argentina that everybody's going to be talking about their favorite Diego memories, and that's the memory. Well, I wasn't watching it. I was a kid. I didn't even know what soccer was yet, John. Like, I was in Riverdale, Georgia, not watching it because I didn't know it was on TV if it was on TV here. That's the reality that I grew up in. Like, soccer wasn't a thing. It didn't happen. I played one season of soccer before that. I'd played 10 games in my life. So, no, it didn't happen for me because we didn't have a team. We didn't have all the games on TV. I don't know if that game was on TV here. If it was, I didn't know about it. But I don't know if NBC or ESPN had that broadcast in the United States. Well, I saw it in the highlights of the tournament. But John, I'd played 10 games of soccer in my life. I didn't know what that meant. How am I supposed to? If you've never played baseball and they show you Hank Aaron's home run to break Babe Ruth's record, what's it going to mean to you? It doesn't mean anything to you. I mean, yeah, it's just that's cool. Like, that's what it meant to me as a kid. It wasn't until after that World Cup, and I've said this a bunch of times, like, that World Cup is what hooked me, because not that game, which everybody points to, it was the semifinal against Belgium that was the first game I remember going out of my way to watch, because I knew it was coming on, and I knew what the tournament meant by that point, because I had seen the Brazil-France quarterfinal, which I know was on TV here. I want to say it was on ESPN. And I knew that the semifinals were going to be on ESPN, and I knew that you could watch them, and I knew what time they were going to be. I mean, this wasn't the day that you could turn on the TV and scroll through the guide and find a game on. This was, again, like 1986. You had commercials during the games. But the Belgium game is where I wanted to go out of my way to watch it, because I was hooked by that point enough to pay attention to the tournament. And that was the game where I was hooked on Diego Maradona. And then the final was a few days later. It's one of the best finals of all time against West Germany. And after that is when I wanted to try to find out as much as I could. But again, there wasn't really a whole lot of sources at that point. I mean, it was go to the library and check out books that didn't have anything about Diego Maradona in them. It was try to find anything you could, and there just wasn't much. That was where soccer was in 1986 in Riverdale, Georgia. So no, I mean, where was I? I was probably in the backyard throwing a baseball or football. No, it's not a moment that stayed with me ever since it happened. It's a moment that I've come to later because I didn't know what happened. It didn't exist. It's a highlight I saw before the final. It's a highlight I saw in the semifinal game that had no context. It was just a goal until I saw everything about it, until I understood the game better. Because, again, I'd played 10 games of soccer in my life. I had no basis for understanding what that meant yet. There's no way I could. So it's grown for me because I'm a student of the game and I love the game, but that's what it can, like, that's what anything can be. I mean, if you come to it later, if you aren't there from day one, you can still have things that are meaningful to you. I mean, there's REM albums that are meaningful to me that I didn't listen to when they came out because I didn't know they existed because it wasn't in my world. But I found it later, and that's important too. Okay, we're having an audio problem with you. Let me see if I can fix that. Sorry, folks. Wonderful times here. There shouldn't be an audio problem with you. There won't be now. How about that? Say hi, John.
Hi, John.
Hi. Stupid Monday mornings. I don't know. I don't know where to start. So you tell us, John. Where do you want to go?
Well, let's start with twits, just to get twits out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Can I give it to an entire team?
Sure.
Arsenal.
Okay, why?
For not sticking up for your goalie getting cracked by Neil Maupay against Brighton until the bitter end, and no Mateus Guendouzi doesn't get a cookie for wanting to choke him out at the end.
Mm-hmm. No, you don't get to try to choke anybody out at the end. I don't know why they didn't even react. I mean, it's one thing to say that, they should have went in 2-footed and broken a guy's leg. All right, that's a little much. But there was no real reaction when it happened. It was weird because you don't let somebody just crash into your goalkeeper. And they did. And they didn't even act like it was a problem until Leno, sitting on the stretcher, sits up and yells at him. And then it's like, oh, yeah, what he said.
No.
I don't get it.
But then at the same time, I think Neil Maupay should be in consideration for what he said after the match anyway.
For being a twit? Why? What did he say after the match that gets him a twit award?
Okay, so here's how it was on Match of the Day. They asked him, what happened at the end? And I thought I hit mute, but some of their players need to learn what is humility, especially one of them.
Okay, what's wrong with that?
I'm building here. I'm looking at subtitles. I mean, he was talking the whole game, but was saying really bad things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say what he said because I could be in trouble. It was in French because he's French. So when I scored, I just needed to say, listen, that's what happens when you talk too much on the pitch.
Why is he a twit?
Actually, I take it back. I thought it was more serious than that.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. That's 100% accurate.
So Neil Maupay's not a twit, but Arsenal is still a twit for not sticking up to your keeper.
I mean, Neil Maupay charged into the goalkeeper. Neil Maupay should have gotten a yellow card at a minimum on that. I think some people trying to say he should have got a red card's a little much.
No, it was just an unnecessary challenge.
Completely unnecessary. He didn't mean to injure him, but it's completely unnecessary. And when you do unnecessary challenges like that on a goalkeeper when they're prone, you can injure them, and that's a problem. Should have been punished. He wasn't. Should have been hit a couple times by Arsenal players.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't. That's part of the game. It is part of the game. You can like it or not, but it is. And nothing. And they're going to talk a lot. Big deal. Like, yippee. If you're just going to talk the rest of the game and say bad things to him, well, then he's going to score a goal and give it back to you.
Yeah.
And he did. And Arsenal lost. And that was really bad for Arsenal.
And according to our friends at the Daily Mail, Maupay is getting some backing from Arsenal's replacement keeper, Emiliano Martinez, who said Maupay didn't mean it.
No, he didn't mean it. It doesn't mean that he shouldn't have been punished for what he did. It doesn't mean that Arsenal players shouldn't have punished him a little bit. You don't have to. I mean, just because that happens and it's okay, you need to get him. You need to hit him a couple times. It doesn't mean you do it to injure him. It means you go in hard for a challenge.
Yeah, you remind him. You remind him a little bit.
You might catch him with an elbow on a corner. Oops, my bad. Sorry, don't run into our keeper like that again.
Yes.
I mean, that's part of the game. And Arsenal just acted like, the reaction to the incident to begin with is what shocked me. There was none.
Yeah.
There was nobody really in his face until the goalkeeper on a stretcher sits up to get in his face.
It's a great photo.
That's it. It's weird. I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Arsenal to then just complain and talk during the game. Well, then you give up a winning goal to Brighton. Brighton beat you.
Brighton.
Late goal.
Exactly.
Come on, Arsenal.
Yeah. So they got to look at themselves in the mirror in between now and their next match and figure out, what's going on between the ears.
Mm-hmm. This is true.
So yes, Arsenal, twit. That's my Monday twit.
Okay. So you're retracting the
I'm retracting
Mopé?
my Neil Mopé. I'm retracting my Neil Mopé twit nomination after looking at his quote in the post match.
Yeah, there was nothing wrong with that.
So yeah.
All right, where do you want to go next? Do you want to look at stuff here, or do you want to look at stuff overseas?
Well, I guess since twit was overseas, you want to go overseas to start?
Sure.
All right. Miguel Almiron used correctly. Imagine what happens. Newcastle got the Duke. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it here in Atlanta for 2 years, what he can do when he's playing in the middle of the park and what he can do when you use him in transition. And the awful shot from Joe Linton, the play before that is exactly what we saw Miguel Almiron do here in Atlanta for 2 years. Pick up the ball and be a one-man break, and his speed can change a game. And when you use him in a spot like that, he can have that impact. When you stick him out wide, when you stick him on the right wing, he doesn't have the same impact. So maybe, for whatever reason, maybe he actually watched some tapes during the break. Steve Bruce finally got him in the right spot. And we'll see if it helps Newcastle in the big picture. But the bigger picture conversation for Newcastle is about the breakthrough in their takeover, which potential breakthrough. Louise Taylor at The Guardian breaks it down a little bit. Saudi Arabia has announced a major crackdown on platforms against platforms illegally streaming sporting events, the Be Out Q thing. So this is what a couple people speculated about that might be the road to getting this done and might be the silver lining in all of this would be, okay, yes, we'll let you buy into our league if you do what you should have done before to begin with.
Yeah.
Okay. If that's the road you want to take, that's what it sounds like they're going to do. Now, the reaction to the World Trade Organization report that put the takeover bid in big-time question, now you've got the reaction that Saudi Arabia is going to crack down on these things and change their behavior, allegedly, and now you're going to move forward. But like we talked about before, you've got the other side of this, Amnesty International and many others that are questioning why the Premier League should allow Saudi Arabia to buy into their league. That part's harder to answer on its own because of some of the other owners you already have in the league. And again, as we talked about last week, the Premier League has never said no to anyone who had the money. They've never done it. This is the longest it's ever even been held up. This is the worst thing for the Premier League because this kind of makes them move forward with it. My hope was that they would use the World Trade Organization's report as the cover to say no to this. And for Newcastle, I mean, I don't know. Maybe maybe it's phony money. I don't know. But the other bid that is on the table from Henry Burris?
Morris.
350 million pounds. It's a bigger bid than this, and he doesn't have any of the questions that this bid has. Newcastle should look to get out of this. Maybe they can't. Maybe it's too far down the road and they can't. They should be begging the Premier League to hold it up because they've got a better offer on the table, unless it's not as good of an offer as it just sounds like, and maybe that's the case. I don't know. I mean, if this is the way it's going to go, yeah, it's looking like they're going to go through with it, which a lot of people have been saying throughout this. I thought the piracy issues would hold it up. I don't think this is good enough. I don't think it's good enough to say, oh, yeah, our bad. Yeah, sorry, we did that. Yeah. Sorry, we won't do it again. That's not good enough. You damaged a partner who's given you over £1 billion in the last 5 years. And now you're going to bring the people that damaged that partner to Not even just to the party, to host the party. BN probably won't be doing anything with the Premier League.
Yeah.
They shouldn't.
No.
I mean, they shouldn't worldwide because this is insulting. This is insulting to them. Money talks. Always. And this is no exception. But I don't think this is a good enough thing to allow it to go through. This is just... It doesn't match the transgressions. The transgressions just on the piracy side have happened for a long time. You wouldn't even let lawyers in the country do anything about it. Saying now you're going to crack down on it? Come on, really? It's bogus. But it's probably going to go through. Still bogus.
Yeah. Official Saudi Authority for Intellectual Property has announced it'll shut down websites involved in illegal streaming, while the Football Federation has written to major sports bodies, including the Prem, accepting it has a, quote, responsibility, end quote, to fight piracy. Daily Mail says some say the timing of the announcements is an indicator of conditions that could be attached to approval of the takeover. And it's Saudi's public investment fund, the PIF, set to take an 80% stake in the club. Amanda Stavely and the Rubin brothers each getting 10.
I mean, there should be questions about Amanda Stavely as well with some of her past business dealings, but the money's good, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to happen. This was the only thing I thought that would actually hold it up. I didn't think any of the rest of it would. And I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying that's how the Premier League has done business. This should have held it up. It still should hold it up. It shouldn't be good enough to say, like, oh, we won't do that again. Well, you already did it for a long time.
Yeah.
And you lied about it. And you wouldn't let anybody try to fix it. So you didn't just do it and it happened and you didn't do enough to stop it. No, you did a lot to prevent people from stopping it. So
and the Prem is now screwing over a partner that they've had for a real long time in BN.
And why that's important? Let's take a look at Germany real quick. So Germany today should be announcing their new domestic broadcast deals. And they're making less money. And we haven't known where this would go with the coronavirus outbreak and the damage to television partners. But the Bundesliga, according to Tariq Panja at New York Times, they're going to make less money than their last deal. And the bigger thing is that a couple of the people that they expected to come in and bid big, we talked about this before, Amazon and Deutsche Telekom, no bid, nothing. It's two broadcasters. So fewer broadcasters, less money. Sky, longtime incumbent, they're back. DAZN is somehow finding money to keep throwing at people. Germany's one of their big markets, so this is one they probably have to try to keep. But if you're the Premier League now, and whenever your next deal come up, BN should walk away. And we'll see if they do. Again, money talks, and the Premier League is big business. But from a just ethical standpoint, BN should walk and not give the Premier League another dime. And in the past, maybe the Premier League would have said, well, that's just the cost of doing business. That's fine. We'll find somebody else. Now, maybe there isn't that somebody else. Maybe that idea of people lining up at the door to offer money to you to broadcast your games, maybe there's not as many people lining up. Maybe there's not as much money in their bag. Germany having this happen, it does set a little bit of an expectation going forward. It's not a dramatic decrease, don't get me wrong, but it's not an increase. And generally, we have seen rights fees just go up and up and up and up and up. Not this time. So keep that in mind. This is for the Premier League, this is not just a simple decision of taking a check or allowing somebody to come into the house. This is going to affect future business because we'll see if BN wants to be your partner still after this.
Yeah, that for me is the $1 billion question. Is okay. Does BN come back to the table? When you have negotiations, are they out? You know, it's like, nah, you've decided that you're gonna date the girl that thought that you think that relationship's going to be better than this one. So Yeah, that to me is going to be one of the big subplots going forward when it comes to contract renewals and dance partners and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I look at what the Premier League did here, or is in the process of probably doing, and it's like, all right, this is your bed, you're going to lie in it, and you're not going to get a lot of fans for this one. You're really not.
I don't know.
I wonder if it's where the Saudis are concerned, if they're looking at it as, okay, the UK government wants to have a better relationship with Saudi Arabia. That's why the government got involved. Does the Premier League think along those same lines that Saudi Arabia is a place where they can have more investment come from that might make up some of that difference in this new environment? I don't know. But
there's not a Saudi equivalent to BN. Because BN's not just buying the rights for Qatar. BN is a company based in Qatar, but they are buying rights for all kinds of different markets around the world.
Yeah.
There's not a Saudi equivalent of that. So no, there's no way to make up that money. It's surprising that they're going to go through with this, and it looks like they will. They still should use this as cover to not invite all of the problems that are there, because it's absolutely valid cover. They should not screw over a longtime partner in this way, and that's what they're going to do by allowing this to happen, no matter what they say about what they're going to do going forward. I don't know. We'll see. Newcastle, it's going to always be Newcastle and do weird things. I really wonder if the Henry Morse bid has any legs to it, and if there's anything he can do to throw a bigger check in front of Mike Ashley to change this. I'm assuming not at this point, because it's almost like he's in the background.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I would imagine that you're going to get an answer this week on that. If this is happening on the Saudi end of it, I'm assuming this was a condition of moving forward. And we'll see if it happens. So keep an eye on Newcastle and their potential business situation, because that's the other side of it, is if this goes down, Newcastle's going to have money to play with in the upcoming transfer market, and not many clubs will. Manchester City, Pep Guardiola on Sky Sports, their match is today, and he gave an interview that they're going to air before it, but Sky gave you a little bit of a preview. He said, I don't know after coronavirus if the situation for clubs financially has changed. We're going to see at the end of the season. In all the places I was, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, and here, if the club says we cannot afford it, then we cannot afford it. It depends if people stay. Maybe in these next 2 months, the team makes a step forward and we decide to continue with the same people. Manchester City might not have money to go out into the market with because of all of the losses. Tottenham is another one, and Tariq Panja at the New York Times had a piece about Tottenham's match in an empty stadium, and they're estimating that in a year, over the next year, their losses could approach $250 million. That's the highest amount for any club in the league, because game day revenue was going to be critical for them opening up a new venue. So what are they going to be able to do? When they tried to do something with the government furlough program, people lost their minds on them, and they didn't do that. They're not going to spend money in the transfer market, because where is it?
Yeah.
They did do a short-term extension with Jan Vertonghen and Michael Vorm for the rest of the season. Then after that, they're out of contract. Tottenham's not going to have money to spend. Manchester City might not have money to spend, and they might not have European future to sell people on. We'll see about that as well. Liverpool probably doesn't need to go out and spend money.
Yeah.
Chelsea is spending money like crazy, and reportedly there's more to be spent. Okay. Newcastle would be in that club. Manchester United, I don't know. It's hard to tell. I mean, if they did bring forward some credit to be able to spend, it looks like. Will they? Probably, because they desperately need to get back into Europe. If they get into the Champions League, they might spend to bolster their squad. If they don't, I think they will spend to try to get into the Champions League next year. And they might have money coming in from Paul Pogba moving as well, which could happen, and that would then change it. That's what I want to make clear here when we're talking about this. Teams going in, when we say they won't spend, that can change if they sell somebody. If they sell somebody that brings in money, then they'll spend that money. But they don't have money without sales to spend. Barcelona is a weird one because Barcelona has been crying poverty and talking about it, and their financials are bad. There's no question about that. But they're trying to find a way to get Lautaro Martinez. I would assume that correspondingly there's going to have to be sales to balance that they can't just go out and spend it. I don't think they have it. Real Madrid can spend. Even Juventus. I mean, the offer the rumor out of AS in Spain, you're seeing different kinds of deals right now. You're less cash and more player swaps, more trades. Yeah. Juventus reportedly looking to offer €30 million Daniele Rugani and Federico Bernardeschi to Wolves for Raul Jimenez. Not what it would have been before, where they might have just offered $60 million or $50 million or $70 million or whatever, and just offered the cash straight up. Now they're trying to find swaps because of salaries, because of it's not having as much money to work with. So it's only now, I feel like the conversation's really changed in the last couple of days with all of this. There's been smaller clubs that have been talking about concern and worry and the business is very bad and how are they going to survive. Now it's bigger clubs who are feeling that hit one way or another. And now in this country, it's leagues as a whole are talking about it in a bigger, broader way than ever before. And we'll get into it with all of the different testing and non-testing situations in the United States. But it feels like we're only now catching up to the reality. Businesses across all industries, for the most part, are taking a hit right now. Sports is no exception. Sports is maybe taking bigger hits because they can't function in a normal way. Even if they get back on the field behind closed doors, it's not the same. The revenue's not the same. And it's going to affect everything, not just right now. It's going to affect the next season. I think it's going to affect multiple seasons. I think you're not going to be able to really weigh the effects of this 3 years. And it might be longer because it's going to affect future TV deals that might come up in 4 or 5 years. But those companies are going to be feeling the effects and might not be able to pay what they've paid before or pay more like some leagues are probably going to look for. It's the reality. And that's why when we get a rumor, actually not even really a rumor because Ezequiel Barco said it in an interview, that Fiorentina and some Ligue 1 teams have talked to his agent and are interested, it's hard to even grasp what the dollars are going to look like. Because Fiorentina is one of those that it feels like might be able to spend, not like a Juventus did in the past, not like other clubs have in the past, but they can spend money right now. But has the valuation changed from the Atlanta United perspective? Are they going to want to hold on to him as long as they can and then get what they can for him, thinking maybe the business turns around a little bit in a year? Or are they going to say, look, it's less than what we expected it would be, but it's still a return on our initial investment, and we're going to go ahead and do it now. And the player's wishes come into that as well. That's where the dance is. You know, if the player really wants to move, it's kind of pointless to force them to stay. It's tough. But the transfer market, throw your hands up and just wait and see. Because there is no way to really guess this. And all the experts are going to have all the different rumors, and all the pundits are going to have all the different ideas about what people should do and how they're going to do it. Everybody's guessing right now because nobody knows truly what clubs are going to have to spend and be able to spend right now. And then the trickle down to the smaller clubs is going to be huge because they're going to have to fill rosters out, and I don't know how exactly. Long term, I hope that this forces more investment in long-term development. But that's a long-term investment. And are people going to be able to do that? At a smaller club, maybe not. At a bigger club, they should because it's cheaper. But are you going to be able to wait? You know, I mean, if you're a Tottenham, for example, you're going to have to go find a center back. Vertonghen isn't going to re-sign, I don't think, unless there's just no market out there for him. So you got to find a center back. And what do you have to spend? Are you going to have to promote somebody from within your system if there's anybody ready? Are you going to have to go get a bargain basement, deal because that's all you can afford? Or are you going to have to sell somebody else in a spot where you have some depth to go get the resources to get the center back that you need? I don't know what the answers are going to be. Nobody does.
Well, and also remember where Tottenham is concerned, yes, you're losing the soccer dates with a full stadium, but they also had other stuff that was planned. I mean, we had the NFL games that were there that was a part of this relationship with the National Football League. You're losing those dates. Anything else that had been planned, everything down to rock concerts and things like that. But from an athletics perspective, Tottenham unveils a new stadium. Now they can't do anything in it, and so that hit is going to be there on multiple levels and multiple lanes of traffic for Tottenham. And I mean, you mentioned Man City. We talked about them last week. It's can they get something for Leroy Sané? Then take that money and reinvest it. But this is going to be a part of the new dynamic. But my question for you is, do you think that we're going to see the widening of haves and have-nots? Of who can spend, the big money clubs who can spend and have been spending in the past, and the lower level clubs who haven't? Is that gap going to widen, do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be a smaller number of halves. Some of the halves are going to become have-nots, at least temporarily. But, yeah, there's no way that it can't, because some of the clubs that have the money right now are fine, and clubs that don't are trying to figure out how to keep a front office together. Clubs are trying to figure out how to pay people. Some, like a Real Madrid's, not worrying about that. They're fine. I think they had minimal pay cuts with their roster, but nothing dramatic. They're going to be okay coming out of this, whereas, mid-tier or lower-tier La Liga clubs are going to be really hurting, and they're not going to be able to compete, and they couldn't before. It's going to be even worse now. So, yeah, I think that gap gets wider, and I think it also grows on the have-not side of it, at least on a temporary basis. And, I mean, the other element of this is these smaller clubs, what's the road back for them? I don't know. I don't know when the revenues are going to turn around for them. I don't know where they're going to be able to change this fortune. So you take a step down, how do you get back to where you were, let alone ahead of where you were? I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like. The other element that's interesting, and I'll be curious to see how people play it, is the whole financial fair play rules being suspended essentially for a year, and you're going to take the revenues for 2 years combined, and I would imagine that it's going to change there. And there's also COVID-19 elements you can include in your books. It's going to be crazy, but whenever there's opportunities like that, somebody takes advantage. And the people who can take advantage are people who have rich owners. And there are some owners who are not taking the same kind of hit. Like Tottenham, you mentioned. Tottenham, not even just because of the revenue losses that everybody's dealing with. There are other events booked for that stadium that were going to help the soccer team, and now they can't happen. So they're taking a hit even beyond just the soccer revenues. Some owners probably made a little more money during this time because some people have. Now, can they just pump more money into their club to separate that gap even further? Well, technically they can, according to financial fair play rules, and then they can try to justify it later. That's going to happen too. So, yeah, I think it's 100% going to get wider.
Breaking news sounder, please.
All right, hold on. There we go.
The NWSL has announced the Challenge Cup rules, regulations, and awards. So all of that paperwork is now out.
Okay, what does all that mean?
Tournament kicks off preliminary rounds, each team playing 4 matches, followed by 2 knockout stages in the final. The top 8 teams out of the preliminary rounds will be placed into a seeded bracket to contest the quarterfinals. If 2 or more teams are equal on points after completion of the preliminary stage, we have criteria to be applied to determine team rankings. Head-to-head, goal difference, greatest number of goals scored in prelims, lowest team conduct score. They've got graphics for that. And then the ever-popular drawing of lots is your 5th tiebreaker. Each team names a final list of 22 to 28 players selected to participate. Those rosters will be announced today. Only the players on the submitted list will be permitted to play in the tournament. Players may join their teams late as long as they're included on the final rosters to be submitted on June 21st. No extra time in any match played in the Challenge Cup and the knockout stage. If a match is tied at the end of regulation, kicks from the penalty mark shall be taken to determine the winner. Teams will be permitted 5 subs, no more than 3 sub stoppages per team allowed in each game. There you go.
Okay.
So there's your rules.
Was there any news in that, really?
I like the ending, the no extra time in the match, no extra time knockout stage.
They were going to do that.
So, and we have awards as well.
Okay.
Tournament MVP, Golden Boot, Golden Glove, each sponsored. NWSL Future Legend, presented to the top performing player in their first season in the NWSL. Best 11. Everything done social media, virtual watch parties. So that is on the NWSL soccer website.
Okay. I mean, it's an announcement that really doesn't announce much, I guess. The rosters have been submitted. Players can join their teams late as long as they were on the roster. News yesterday, Carly Lloyd will not be participating. Minor knee injury suffered during training, according to the club. She made it clear that it's nothing more than that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's kind of ridiculous that became the question. But anyway, no, she said she's not pregnant. That's what she made clear in her tweet about this, and that shouldn't have been questioned. I don't know. It's not where my head went.
No,
I'm curious about Kristen Press, Carly Lloyd, Megan Rapinoe. Okay, Lloyd, we know it's a minor knee injury. I'm not going to question it. Carly Lloyd's about as competitive as it gets, so I don't really see her taking this off to just not play.
Yeah.
Press and Rapinoe, we haven't really heard anything further on it. Has there been an official announcement in either case?
I have not seen one.
I mean, the tournament starts on Saturday.
Yeah.
And it feels like we're all just guessing or waiting on things, and nothing's really happening. This needs to be the kickoff to more things coming out. So I'd love to know what the explanation is on Press and Rapinoe and what's going on there, because I don't know. We know Lloyd's not playing. We've heard that Press and Rapinoe aren't. Is there anybody else? That's another question.
Yep.
Are there other national team players or other players, period, who are not going to play? We'll have to wait and see. But Saturday, Portland, North Carolina on CBS. They hyped that up during the golf tournament this weekend, which was kind of cool that Jim Nance is reading NWSL promos.
Yeah.
But we'll wait and see what happens with NWSL. Need more meat on the bone here. Need more to talk about with NWSL. The rules, I mean, it's basic rules of competition that most competitions are following. So it's pretty basic. Nothing really new there.
But, to your point, I'd like to know rosters. I'd like to know who's going to be there, who's not going to be there, because it is the end of the week. So, let's get a lot more information, please.
Yeah, I just want more stuff to talk about, because they're going to be first in the U.S. They're going to have a huge opportunity, and they're also going to set an example, I think, for others, and that's something that is going to be talked about. You've got a lot of questions right now about sports in this country. due to coronavirus. A lot of questions. A lot of things are being thrown around without proper context. A lot of things are just being thrown out there with nothing behind it. Atlanta United had a second positive test. We'll get into the details on that. Let's stop here for a second because we've got a lot of stuff on the other side to talk about on the American front. Is there anything else worldwide you want to get into first?
Looking at my worldwide notes. The World Cup 2023 bid.
Yeah, Japan backed out, which all but gives it to Australia, New Zealand. Their scores on the review of their bid were a good deal higher than anybody else to begin with. Japan was somewhat close. Colombia and Australia, New Zealand are the only two still left, and I'd be blown away if it doesn't go to Australia, New Zealand at this point. The bid is stronger. Japan is going to throw their support behind it. It feels like that's the better option right now. So 2023 Women's World Cup, the vote will be later this week. It should go to Australia and New Zealand.
And I think that is all I had on my worldwide sheet. So I think the rest of it's domestic, yes?
Yes, but first, why don't you tell us about our good friend in Decatur, Steve Apolinski.
As we come back from one coast, crossing back over to the Atlantic, to stuff here. Apolinski & Associates, LLC, aa-legal.com. Wrongful death and serious injury attorneys ranked top 100. Legal Elite, Georgia Trend Magazine, for their work that they've done over the last 30 years, over $40 million in judgments for their clients in wrongful death and serious injury cases. A couple different ways that you can get in touch with them. aa-legal.com is the website. The second you go there, pop up, low right-hand corner. It's a chat window, 24/7, 365 or 366. You can catch up with somebody. If you have any questions, you can also give them a buzz for a free consultation at 404-377-99191 or shoot Steve an email at sdeb@aa-legal.com. Once again, Apolinski & Associates, proud supporters and sponsors of everything SDH and the SDH Network. aa-legal.com.
All right, we got a lot of stuff to get into on this side of the pond. So, mentioned it a minute ago, Atlanta United, second player tested positive. Here's what I know about how the protocols and everything work in this. I think it's something to keep in mind here. They're testing every other day during the week, so Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And you had the first positive test on Wednesday. It was followed up with a second test to make sure that it was not a false positive. On Thursday, then it was announced that it was a positive. Wednesday, according to the release on Saturday, the second player was in self-isolation since Wednesday. And that's the way this goes, maybe on a couple of fronts. I'm assuming, and this is just speculation on my part, that the second player had been in some contact with the first, and that's why they were in self-isolation. The team did not have full team training after that positive test because the whole group was being tested on Friday. And if there were, all clear, then you could come back to full team training. Friday's round of testing, there was the second positive. It was confirmed in a follow-up on Saturday. So now you're back to that same schedule. Everybody will be tested today if you get the all clear in the group, with the exception of the two players who have been isolated, then you will return to full team training. But every time there's a positive, that puts a hold on full team training. And this was a question we had. Are you going to have players training while there are test results being waited for if there is a positive? We now know that's not the case. So that's another safety precaution in place. But you have the follow-up test 24 hours after the positive test to make sure it is a true, accurate test. And then you move forward with the regular rounds of testing. And that's where Atlanta United is right now. You've had two players test positive out of, I don't know how many they're testing. In the Premier League, for example, we know they test 60 a week. Is it going to be 60 people here? Maybe. Probably not yet because you're not worried about games and you're not doing games in your venue. It's probably a little bit smaller number, but it's probably between 45 and 50, I would assume, because it's players, it's technical staff. Any players with Atlanta United 2 that are doing any kind of training with the first team would be part of that testing, I would assume, because it's just for safety's sake. So you're going to have a large group of players, your technical staff, your medical staff, your sports science staff, any communications folks who are on site, any digital staff who are on site, anybody who is interacting in any way with the players. So 45 to 50 people being tested 3 times a week, every other day during the week, and that's how you're doing this. So that's where you're at. 2 positive tests. Miami's had a positive test. DC had a positive test. Dallas had one. That player's already back. Philadelphia had one before they returned to training. That's where MLS is. NWSL's had 1 positive test. Haven't heard anything following up that. Don't know what team it was with. Now, the whole college situation is in another universe because of the lack of all those protocols we just talked about. College, I mean, some teams aren't even testing people coming back to show up and just letting them work out. And they're just working out. They're not doing practices, or at least they're not supposed to be. Maybe they're pulling a flamingo and doing them behind the scenes. Who knows? College coaches, I'm not putting anything past them. But they're working out, but they're not working out in a socially distanced way, it sounds like. It's not even the individual training that MLS teams were doing and other teams around the world were doing, where they come back, they're following protocols, they're not being tested yet because they're not interacting with anybody outside of social distancing rules, with masks, with gloves, with all of that. That's a different conversation. So how is it spreading in these college programs? There's no protocols. No other sport in the world, no other league in the world is having the issue that Clemson has had, that LSU has had, that Texas has had. Nobody. So when you see those numbers, you can't say that's a problem for MLS. You just can't. It's not there because they're doing things completely differently. Then you get into the question about Central Florida and Orlando, and we've talked about it and talked about it and talked about it, and we're going to still talk about it because it's going to keep coming up. The situation with positive tests in Orange County is not good at all. But you're not interacting with Orange County in this scenario. Dr. Fauci talked about it from a football perspective and said they have to be in a bubble to be able to play, or he doesn't see it working. Well, this is going to be in a bubble. That's the whole point. The testing now, before they get into the bubble, is to prevent anybody from bringing the virus into the bubble. And then there is still testing when you come into the bubble to make sure that, okay, if we missed anything or somebody wasn't doing things correctly or something crazy happened between you leaving your market and coming into this one, you're going to get identified and you're going to be separated from the group. You have all those protocols in place to do it safely. Is it perfect? No, nothing is. Because you have a huge issue with the virus in general. And that's what I take out of this. That's what I take out of Atlanta United having positive tests. That's what I take out of the college side having the test results that they do. That's what I take out of all of it. The minor league baseball teams, who I don't think baseball's doing any kind of organized testing yet. I don't know what their protocols are yet because they don't have an agreement of any sort yet. So it's probably team by team just figuring it out. I would assume they let people come in and start using their facilities before they started testing on a regular basis. That's why you're getting these things. The National Hockey League hasn't started its testing protocols yet. You've had some positives in Florida. Tampa Bay, right?
Yep, Tampa Bay and Austin Matthews of the Maple Leafs.
Okay, so you've had one outside of Tampa Bay, but you've had issues there. They have not started their full testing because they haven't returned to training yet officially, right?
Right.
Okay, so they're not in the same conversation yet. It's all different, and what any of that tells me, about the only thing it can tell you, is that for you listening, for us doing the show, for anybody who is your average person, the coronavirus is still out there waiting on you. Mm-hmm. So be careful and be smart and follow all of the things that people are telling you. But that's a different conversation than doing sports, whether it is in the manner that the Premier League or the Bundesliga or La Liga or Serie A is doing. It's a different conversation than what MLS and the NWSL and the NBA and the WNBA have proposed with bubble-like scenarios. It's a different conversation than the NHL will get to when they start on that road to it, which will be bubble-like scenarios. Major League Baseball, who knows? I don't know. They can't get to this point yet. But what's going on in the general population and what's going on for these teams, there are some relations because these people are part of their communities. But when they get into their playing scenario, they are being protected even more than the teams in Germany and England and Spain and Italy and other countries who have come back. And one of the main reasons why is probably because the virus has not been contained in this country effectively like it was in especially Germany, but how it's been contained in other countries who got it first and have dealt with it better, flat out. The idea of not doing tests and that's going to help the situation, please, just stop. That was ridiculous, and please don't pay attention to that nonsense. The idea of testing is critical for these reasons. And if you're a sports fan, I think you understand, or you should, if you're paying attention, the need for testing and how important it is. Because it is there to prevent outbreaks. It's there to prevent what is happening with some of the college teams that are not following things right. The protocols for when they train is also there too. Now, again, football is a different conversation because of the nature of the sport. Football is a different conversation because when you go back to soccer, and basketball is pretty similar to this, basketball has a couple different things that change it a little bit. But in soccer specifically, you have very few situations where players are around one another for an extended period of time. It's been studied by country after country, league after league. It is low risk. The situations where they are situations that the game needs to work to change, and they're changeable. Not having players crowd the referee to complain, not having crowd ups, making set pieces move faster, get them done faster, not having those situations. But that still takes a low-risk thing to like a medium-risk thing for one instance in a match, or a couple instances in a match. It's a different conversation. Football's different. What blows me away is that football's not even training yet. College football is not even training yet. They're not even practicing yet. And you're having these issues because do they have protocols in place for how they're working out? It really seems like they're not. Because here's my guess, and here's my speculation, and if I'm way off base, if I'm crazy with this, please let me know.
I will.
You have athletes who have the same life as people. They go to the store, they eat food, they put gas in their car, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think soccer players and football players or college football players in general have a different life that would expose college football players more to the virus. Now, the question would be, like in LSU, where there was a nightclub situation that reportedly added to their issues. Take that out, or maybe just take the age out. Maybe older professional athletes are a little more mature and are following instructions a little bit more about what to do outside of the issue, outside of the training situation. But you haven't seen this same spread in any other team in the world that you're seeing right now in college football. It's got to be two different things. To me, there's only two answers. One, the way they are actually doing the workouts, the lack thereof or faulty protocols for how the workouts are being conducted. The
voluntary workouts.
Of course. Well, no, that not even going to go there because the MLS workouts were voluntary until they've started full team training. That's the same. That's not it. That's not it at all because that's not the issue. It's what's going on during the workout. Are they trying to social distance? Because when MLS players, for example, started their individual workouts at sites, It was separate. They were completely separate. There were protocols in place to guarantee that they were separate. There was not interaction. Is that happening with these just workouts that are happening with college football? Don't know. Have to ask, because they don't have the same situation with testing that other leagues have implemented. They are having more of an outbreak. You have to ask why. The protocols have to be a question. The other is the fact that you're talking 18 to 22-year-olds for the most part, and are they taking the virus seriously? The LSU side, probably not, because there was a nightclub scenario in this. Pro athletes probably are not going to nightclubs for the most part, although we have seen a few. We have heard about a few issues of people being stupid, and they've been lucky. But those are the only two things, the protocols and the age maturity level of the athletes. Those are the only two things that I see different.
The 18 to 22 aspect of it, most certainly. You're hanging out with your buddies, you're doing college things, and when you have a family and you're in your late 20s, early 30s, that difference to me is there. I have seen photographs out of newspapers with these voluntary workouts in some of the schools, and I want to say it was in Texas, where you've got guys and they're in shorts and no shirt and they're hanging out at a park and they're doing like their contact and their passing drills and things like that. So it is away from athletic facilities, even though it is still on the college campus.
So is that with a coach there? Is that being... I did not see a coach in any of these photographs. Okay. So that's another issue. Again, it's protocol or not following the protocol, and that's also the individuals deciding not to or being told not to. We don't know exactly how that goes. Bern Dursberger says it could be related to working out in gyms, but I think most of these college football programs are working out outside.
Yeah.
Could there be some who are doing it incorrectly? Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, you had some not even test people showing up day one, so it wouldn't shock me. Yeah. But, yeah, I think most are working out outside. That's what I've read.
But when it comes to the notion of the voluntary workout, I will posit this idea. When it comes to the voluntary workout scenario, when it comes to college football, I would maintain that it's really not a voluntary workout if you want to keep your scholarship. And I would love to know, after this football season, whenever this college football season's over, if a student athlete decides not to go and be a part of these voluntary workouts, how many of these athletes have their scholarships magically disappear, or they're told to go to other places because they were not participating in these voluntary workouts?
I don't think that's the question, though. That has nothing to do with the spread of the virus. That's a voluntary workout in any scenario, because we know it's not voluntary.
Right.
I mean, but that's the same as it is in a pro situation. I mean, OTAs, there's restrictions on what an NFL team can do if somebody doesn't want to come to OTAs, but we know it changes the relationship. So, no, that's not causing more spread because they're telling people to come work out. It's what they're doing. It's not about telling people to show up. It's then actually doing the right things. Testing when they come in. Consistently testing. No athletic program, no college athletic program has come out and said they're testing more than once a week. No, Pac-12 said they're testing. They're going to start testing.
As a conference, yes, but we haven't heard individual universities sit there and say...
But hold on. Pac-12, they're not going to allow their schools not to hit that minimum. So those schools are doing that, but that's once a week.
Right.
I mean, Pac-12, you're not going to have a school come out and say, yeah, we're not going to listen to our conference. No, that's not going to happen. The Pac-12 and their schools say they're going to test once a week. Okay. Nobody else has any uniform policy.
Correct.
Houston didn't test coming in the door, period. Others have said they're testing when people show up, and then they'll test if they see symptoms. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's voluntary or not. It can be voluntary, and people can show up absolutely voluntary, but those policies are going to accentuate any spread that happens. I want to correct one thing. Shiva, I saw your tweet. Shiva said, looking back at Atlanta United's test results and how things were handled, we see it's actually so important that the second player self-isolated and group training was paused. We have to remember the second player probably tested negative first and then positive a day later. No, that's incorrect. The first player tested positive on Wednesday. Then they did a follow-up. It was announced on Thursday when you got the follow-up results. The second player tested positive on Friday. Now, they had been self-isolating since Wednesday because there was a positive test, and they were isolating from that. My question that I don't have an answer to is, was the second player self-isolating more or differently than anybody else in the team because they had been around that player for any extended period of time who tested positive? Maybe, maybe not. It was said in the release that they self-isolated starting Wednesday. They tested positive on Friday, though, after the first player tested positive. So that we need to understand the protocol and how it follows, because that's really important. But you're dead on. This is why you test. This is why you handle it the way you do, to prevent an outbreak. You had a positive test on Wednesday. You got the results back. You put a hold to full team training. You probably told anybody through any kind of contact tracing, any kind of conversations with the player who tested positive. Were you working in a group? Were you hanging around certain players more? Yes. Did you go to have dinner with somebody? Was there something that we should know about anybody else who's at more risk? Maybe that's why the second player self-isolated. We don't know. There could have been a bunch of players who self-isolated. But positive test on Wednesday, you get the results back, put a hold to full team training. The player who tested positive on Wednesday, follow-up test for them on Thursday, it was confirmed and it was announced. Friday, full round of testing for everybody because that's the normal schedule. Another positive on Friday. You were still on hold for full team training, waiting on the results from Friday. The player who tested positive on Friday, follow-up test on Saturday, confirmed it. It was announced. Then you're still on hold for full team training. Monday, today, full round of testing for everybody. If everybody gets the all go, you come back to full team training tomorrow. That's the protocol. That's how it went down with this. So keep that in mind. You're dead on. This is why you test. This is why the protocols are important. But the second player did not test. Oh, tested negative first because, they tested negative on Wednesday. Sorry, I think I'm misreading it. They tested negative on Wednesday. They tested positive 2 days later on Friday in the next round of testing because that's how the testing goes. It's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. There we go. Sorry, Shiva. I think I misunderstood, but we're on the same page now.
The one thing, the overarching element for me when we got into the college discussion is, once again, the NCAA, who's supposed to be the top of the ladder in all of this, not coming out with a uniform policy. Color me shocked, I know. But
it's mind-blowing. When the NCAA comes out with, we got all of our practice protocols in place for additional practices since they missed spring practice, and you can start doing this, you can do this, we got our whole calendar lined up, look at us, we did good work. Why don't you have a protocol for testing? Because my fear is what we're seeing play out right now. I've seen it from people. Well, this happened at LSU, or this happened at Clemson, and that means you shouldn't have Atlanta United play. Well, Atlanta United's doing this or doing that, but this happened in Clemson. Well, I don't know what Clemson's protocols are. That's why I feel like I'm yelling into the void a little bit. I want college football writers. I want NFL writers who are still developing the policy, it sounds like, for NFL, what it's going to look like. I want National Hockey League writers, baseball writers. Baseball writers have a lot on their plate right now, but everybody's throwing around the minor league situations or the facilities in Florida that are having problems. What are they doing? Are they testing? What is their protocol? Are they coming in with masks? Is there anything about social distancing as they arrive? Is there anything in place to do things differently than they normally do? If there's not, is it crazy to think that having all of these protocols and having all of these things that have happened, not just in MLS, not just in the NWSL, but in the Bundesliga, across 2 divisions, across multiple divisions, 3rd division's playing too, in Spain, across 2 divisions, in Italy, in England. Is it possible that maybe the minor league baseball sites, the spring training sites, the college football programs are just wrong in what they're doing? And maybe you can do this responsibly and effectively if you follow these protocols and these rules. It appears that you can. I think we have a lot of evidence to show that you can. But if you just look at it and say, well, Clemson, nope, can't do this over here, that's not right either. That's not given the full context of this. What is Clemson's protocol? What is Clemson doing? Are they testing coming in the door and then no more testing? What does their practice look like? We have to have these answers. Because if you have Dabo Swinney up there saying, well, yeah, we know we're not supposed to do this, but we're going to do it this way because I say so. Well, then that's a problem. If he's not doing that, but they just don't really have the right protocols in place, and yeah, they're working out on workout equipment around the practice field, but there's 5 guys sitting around for 20 minutes at a time hanging around one another, well, then that's a problem. And then if you're changing up the groups every day, that's a problem because nobody's doing it that way. You have all the information in place for how these other leagues have done it. College football programs not following that, it is ignorant, it is just arrogant, and it's incredibly irresponsible, not just to your players but to sports as a whole, because your average person is just going to hear Clemson with a bunch of positive tests, well, you can't do sports. That's not true. That's not true. You had a positive test on the PGA Tour. You didn't have an outbreak. You had 1 positive test. Okay. You have positive tests in the community right now because it's part of life at the moment. And we have to understand that. We have to understand that there's just no escaping it in total right now. Can you do sports responsibly and safely? I think we have a lot of information to show that you can. But you better be responsible or you're going to have this happen. And if you can't be responsible, then you don't need to do it. If you can't afford to do all the testing that's needed for this, you don't need to do it. You don't need to do it. If you can't act responsibly and you're a college football coach running a program, because you are the one that's responsible. That's what you always want to say anyway. If you can't do it, then don't do it. Sit out the season. Because the virus isn't going anywhere right now. That's kind of understandable at this point if you're paying attention. It's not just going to disappear. So you've got to be responsible. And there's too many people who aren't. But the way it's being reported is not accurate either. We need more information on what's going on at these college football programs.
According to NCAA rules, coaches are not allowed to require or organize training, and they can't interact with players during workouts.
That doesn't matter. I don't care about that. Yippee. Dabo Swinney's sitting in an office. You think that people aren't doing what he's telling them to? Come on. Nick Saban's going to just, say, well, I can't have anything to do with this. I'm going to have to walk away now. Shut up. They're overseeing it in some form or fashion. We know that. It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. They can oversee it. They cannot oversee it. What matters is how are you doing it? I feel like we throw the stuff in the protocol question about like, well, it's a small number of people. It's this. They're not sitting next to one another on the bench. We throw that out like it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. Mm-hmm. It's a huge deal because it decreases risk. If you just have everybody pile into the locker room and everybody sit and hang out for an hour, yes, you're increasing risk if there is someone positive in that group. You can do all the testing, and that is absolutely helpful. But nothing is 100% guaranteed. So you have to do everything possible to minimize it. If you're coming into a college football program and saying, yeah, well, we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. That doesn't make any sense. We're not going to do that. We're going to test when they come in, and if they test negative, then we're good to go. And they're just going to practice, and they can hang out, and they can do whatever they're going to do. And, yeah, we're not going to have full practices yet. And the coach, I care less, doesn't have anything to do with it. But if you're not following all the rest of the things in place, you can't pick and choose on this. You can't pick and choose and say, well, we're going to do the testing when they come back, but we're not going to do the regular testing. And the protocols for how the workouts go, that doesn't really matter because we tested when they came back. You can't do that because you get found out like this. And that's what's happening in college football right now. But what's the problem is that combined with what's happening in society right now, especially in Central Florida, in this scenario, is you've got people saying now it's not safe to do it in the way that it's set up to do. When the track record of doing it in this way works, but this is an even stronger way of doing it than what the Bundesliga and Premier League and La Liga and Serie A, etc. are doing because it has a bubble component. This is an even more safe way of doing it. So this is a tough conversation, and it's not going to get any easier. But you have to talk about all of the aspects of it. It can't just be, well, this happened, well, we're going to talk about this one element. It can't be just little things here and there. You have to talk about it holistically, because this is not going to go away if we just say, well, I don't want to wear a mask because I don't like how it looks. Well, you're missing all the other information. Well, I want to go and hang out with my friends at the bar, and yeah, I know you're not supposed to, but man, I just really want to. Well, then you're not paying attention to all the rest of it. And every element of it from a sports perspective, it's the same thing. You can't say, well, I don't want to do it that way. You can't say, I don't want to do it that way because I don't want to. And I have to go unlock the door because Ashley went out for a walk, and I locked the door on her. So hold on.
All right, well, I'll fill
Take
some
it,
time.
John.
Yep, go for it. I think that the larger point to what Jason is getting to is that when it's not just A to B. That's not what this whole thing is about. It's not a straight line, and it's not just one issue, and it's not just one element of this. It is a bunch of different things contributing to a larger picture, and I think that we get wrapped up in seeing what one sport is doing, and we need to focus on what that particular sport's doing incorrectly, learn from it, hope that they learn as well, but at the same time understand that what one sport is doing is different from another, and they're taking all of the elements that they've learned from all of the other sports around them, applying it to their case, and putting the best case scenario out there so they can have something resembling competition and sport for that particular year. MLS has learned from what we've seen overseas. They've learned from Bundesliga. They've learned from Premier League. They're taking those ideas, applying it to their idea of how they want to have a season. And yes, they're going to continue to learn. The idea may tweak and evolve to a certain extent, but they have a base notion from all the information that they've gathered when it comes to putting on competition. They have testing procedures in place that are more rigorous because they've seen testing procedures do A, B, C, D, and E, and they want to be more rigorous about it. They want to make sure that their athletes are as safe as possible. Just because you see something happening in one element of society that isn't being done correctly doesn't mean it immediately applies to something else, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I will let the person who sent me this black helicopter theory tell me if they want me to say who said it, because they sent it to me privately. But I'm going to talk about the theory because, man, what I know of college football coaches, yeah, I can see this happening. Here's your tinfoil hat. Here's your black helicopter. Once players test positive, and hey, if you want everybody to test positive, test them positive right now, because then they won't have to sit during the season. So are they trying to do a herd immunity thing? Because they're not making up the positive tests. But are they trying to do this thing where it's like, let's just let everybody get sick now? Man, I hope not, because I know what people say. It is a much smaller risk, to your health if you're younger. That's true. Still a risk. It's still a risk, and it's a risk that I wouldn't want to take.
No.
It is still a risk, and it's less of a risk. The numbers, and I think the numbers in Italy show you that, it has been predominantly older, predominantly people with some other health issue. The questions that I have about that is, that's true, don't get me wrong. The questions about trying to extrapolate that going forward, I think now you're starting to see a larger number of younger people getting sick, which is not a huge surprise because you're having more people out, you're having more people doing things, you're having more interaction. All that makes sense. I get it. But you're also seeing a larger number of younger people because of that get really sick, go to the hospital and have issues. Larger numbers than before. Smaller numbers than older people who catch it, but still happening. If that's the avenue that college football programs are taking, that's a huge risk. And that would be mind-blowingly risky and mind-blowingly irresponsible, because all it takes is one player to have a medical condition that you didn't know about and really get sick. Hank Gathers, for example.
Yeah.
Hank Gathers was the best or one of the 5 best college basketball players at Loyola Marymount in the country. Absolute beast of a player. Would have been a really early pick in the NBA draft, and had an undiagnosed heart issue and died on the court. Mm-hmm. You don't think there's college football players who have undiagnosed health issues? You don't think you have offensive linemen who are obese? These are real things.
Like the Eric Blanchard case at UCF, yeah.
Yeah, we've seen college football athletes die in training, and irresponsible training, but training.
Yep.
If you add a virus like this, that if the wrong person catches it, can truly get sick and have major health issues or die, it's not worth the risk. Could some be thinking that? Man, I hope not, but I'm not putting anything past them. I think there might be legs to this, but
I think
it's not worth it.
Yeah, I'm only looking at it while I am, I can see it. I think that college football coaches and programs are only looking at what's in front of them. I don't think they're necessarily.
Let's be clear. Don't say all of them are. Don't say college football coaches are doing that. Don't say college football programs are doing that. There are plenty who are very responsible and would not put up with that.
But I think that some programs are only looking at the here and now, getting ready for their season. They're not thinking about herd immunity and thinking those extra steps down the line is what I was getting to.
I don't know. Because I've heard
I wouldn't put it past them, but I still think that if you're looking at that case, I think that you have coaches who are wanting to get their kids out there for voluntary workouts to get that extra step or two, that get that extra workout, so you can be that much more prepared for your season.
I want to make it clear. I don't think the voluntary workout has anything to do with it. You keep bringing that up like it's an important element. It's not. I really don't think that's it, because it's about how the workout's being conducted. That's the issue. Whether the players can opt out or not, I don't think most of these players are going to opt out because they want that advantage too. It's not about that. It's about doing the workout in a responsible way to try to prevent issues from popping up. That's what's important, whether it's voluntary or not. We know voluntary, not voluntary. That joke's been out there about every sport that has any kind of voluntary workout. You saw it with MLS. All the individual practices were voluntary, and you saw, I don't think anybody said they were opting out of the voluntary workouts. So I don't think anybody came out publicly and said that. So that's not the issue. The issue is, do you have some college football programs and coaches who are thinking this way? Like, well, if they get sick now, then that's better than them testing positive during the season and me missing a couple games. I would not be surprised. Do you have some who don't take it seriously, who don't take the protocols and don't take the threat seriously? Absolutely, because we're seeing people do that. So, of course, college football coaches are going to do that. I do think, and this is something that is another element of this, in the pro sports side of it, all the coaches are being tested as well. All the referees that will be involved in these games are being tested as well. The threat for me in a college football scenario, a college sports scenario, and a high school sports scenario, and anything else where there's not enough testing is, the risk is more to the coaches because they're older. The risk is more to the referees because they're older. Those things are accurate. And if you're not doing the protocols and the testing properly, you're going to put them at risk too. And maybe some of them don't care about that risk. I don't know. But it's all very complicated. I hope that that this conspiracy theory, which is a good one, like this is conspiracy theories for me, if they have no kernel of truth, I don't even care. This has a kernel of truth to it because I've heard people say this. I've heard people say that, well, if you have your positive test now, then the players will be fine later. That's all good. But, and I don't know if this has been truly nailed down yet. I think we're under a pretty good understanding that once you have it, you are at a decreased risk to have it again. But the antibodies are not 100% the same for everybody because not everybody catches it the same way. If you have a mild case, do you have strong enough antibodies to protect you in October? I don't think we know that yet.
Yeah.
So that's not necessarily the case. And then the other question for me is, okay, if you are exposed to it in October and you've had it before and you have antibodies, so you're going to be okay, can you still spread it to other people when you get it then? Does it solve that problem? I don't know if it does. Those are two questions that I don't have the answers to. If somebody does, please share them with me because I'd like to know that. Information and knowledge is going to be the key here. And if you're not testing, you don't have the knowledge. If you're not following the protocols that are in place, you're ignoring knowledge. That's just what I keep coming back to. So my risk, my worry with college football is that people are not going to pay attention to the differences in the way that they're functioning, and if they're being reckless, or if they've got this idea that they can get herd immunity with their team, or they can avoid suspensions later because players get sick or whatever. If they're doing things that way, people aren't paying attention to the big picture. They're not paying attention to why they're doing the protocols the way they are. And they're going to say that MLS or NWSL or NBA, who have invested significant time in creating a safe way to come back, are going to be punished for others being reckless.
Yeah.
And that's my issue with it.
Yeah, you want to roll those dice about not paying attention to protocols and not paying attention to testing and consistent testing and monitoring and all that kind of stuff. You want to roll those dice? That's not a game I think you want to play, but sadly right now you're looking at universities who just aren't really playing with any kind of set of rules, and it's the biggest issue. It is frustrating, it is maddening, it is disappointing that you don't want to play by the rules to be as safe as possible taking athletics out of it, just with the safety of the individuals around you that are a part of your everyday.
But some of these colleges aren't really thinking this way when it comes to students coming back either. So,
No.
It's not really a surprise that the same
it's not.
lack of full understanding and thought is there for the athletic side as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, yes. Stephen Goff with the Washington Post has some more info in the NWSL, and this is the news I was looking for earlier.
Okay.
The NWSL season in 2020 will be defined by the number of games played by a team in the tournament. The only way, and this is a source of Stephen Goff's, quote, the only way the the NWSL, plays a regular season as if there is a path to open the stadium to fans, and that's pretty low. In brackets in Goff's tweet says a large number of fans. I wonder if that's what was being suggested or just fans in general. I don't know what large number means. I don't know what the percentage is of any of that. But they're saying that's pretty low for that to be possible for the NWSL. So this is likely the NWSL season, which we had heard before, hadn't really been confirmed yet. That's what they're saying. The awards for the 2020 season are tied to this tournament. There's not full season awards because more likely than not, there won't be any more league matches. This will be it. The league will announce the tournament rosters today, and Goff is expecting at least 5 U.S. women's national team players to opt out. Now, I want people to understand that issue, because that is a very specific issue to the NWSL. One, players can opt out, no effect to their salary at all. U.S. women's national team players have salary from the Federation, which has not been touched, and there are no plans to reduce it, even though they're not going to play this year the rest of the year. And they have a salary from the league. They have 6 figures plus. I want to say all of them are in the $100,000 to $200,000 a year range that won't be touched regardless. 5 players are going to opt out. It's a little bit different conversation opting out when you have that as opposed to a player who is playing for a future contract or playing to potentially get into the national team pool or has a lot on the line this year. So the bigger picture I have is why are they opting out? Carly Lloyd, if there's an injury, different conversation. Any kind of an injury going into this, I totally get it. Even if it's a minor injury, totally get it. If you're just opting out because you don't want to play, it's not good enough. It's just not good enough because this league doesn't grow with that attitude. It doesn't. The NWSL needs the biggest names playing. If they have a valid reason, there is no question about it. That's fine. But if it's just because they don't want to play, or then they say that they don't feel like it's safe, but everybody else is playing and they feel like it's safe, then really, it's a bad thing for the league that if you have 5 who don't play. Unless you have 5 injuries, which you very well could. But we haven't heard about injuries for anybody other than Carly Lloyd. So it's not a good thing for the league to have that happen. The league's going to have to work hard to overcome that. And they're going to have to work hard in general, but they're going to have to work even harder to overcome the absence now of Carly Lloyd, reportedly of Megan Rapinoe. I mean, she's not training, so I think we can assume that she's not going to play. Kristen Press, same thing. Alex Vehar, Salt Lake Tribune reported that she wasn't training, so you can assume she's not going to play. That's 3 big names. That's 3 really big names in this league. And if they opt not to play, that's going to affect how people think about this. And that's a shame, because this is an opportunity for the NWSL to do something this year and to potentially grow. They've added some sponsors. They've done the best they can. This hurts it. And I hope it's not more than 5, and I hope that the ones who opt out have an injury issue as a reason for it. Because if they're just opting out because they can, that's a problem. That's a big problem for the league. And it's something, honestly, look, it came up last year after the World Cup. You had a lot of players who were very slow in returning to their NWSL teams. And yeah, they went through the World Cup and they went through a ton of publicity afterwards that was good for the game. And they had a lot of opportunities in front of them afterwards. But you had a lot of players who didn't take the league seriously afterwards, didn't come back in a strong way. And that's a shame. That's going to hurt the league. We have to get to the point, and I think on the men's side we have, in that the national team is a big deal, but the day-to-day at the club is what grows the game. The women's side, that has to be the case, because the national team can't be the only thing to grow the game. It has to be the day-to-day in market at the club level. You have to have that. And if players don't take that part seriously, that's not good. We'll see.
Yeah, just don't wanna has never been a good excuse for me.
No,
I can't really
no.
put it in any other simpler terms. Just because you don't want to do something doesn't mean it's a good reason to bail on it. So,
what do we have on Twitter?
What do we have on Twitter? We have Tafka's Opus, which is he's got the short version. We can get into that in a little bit. We have Chris Hutchison, who's in this morning with a bunch of things, as he always is. He says, as rusty as many of the EPL teams have looked since their return, I have to think that whomever comes out in the most coordinated form in MLS's back tournament will sweep.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to the coaching. I think we're seeing the coaching and the motivation be a big part of this. It's going to be different with MLS because it's a tournament format, even though those games count for regular season. It's a tournament format. So, right, Liverpool, for example. Liverpool's got nothing to play for right now. I mean, they've got the league. They're not going to blow a 22-point lead. Like, they've got the league. Just show up. I mean, there's no motivation. And it looked it yesterday. Teams that I think the manager does a good job preparing their players to play are the ones who are shining at the moment. And the ones who aren't, they're not. They're not sharp. So, I mean, you're going to have rustiness no matter where. But I think the better managers will stand up and show up here in this. And MLS will be the same. But the thing in MLS is you won't have that situation like you have with Liverpool, where it's just show up and play. It doesn't mean anything because all these games mean something because there's going to be money on the line at the end of this tournament. But also, it is a tournament. That's going to help. That's going to raise the intensity, I think, from the jump. That's a good thing about the format MLS has.
Jill Robbins, the Soccer for Good OG, in our NCAA discussions, he says, silly wabbit, the NCAA doesn't care about athletes. It only cares about revenue. Hashtag NCAA plantation. Hashtag pay the kids. Hashtag unfair working conditions.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. The one thing I will say about that, because it's come up a lot, the money part of it in sports in general, it's valid. I mean, that's why you have games that are going to happen. That's why you have restaurants that opened with restrictions. That's why you had breweries find a way to do takeout. That's why you have businesses having to find new ways to function, because money makes the world go round. You know, the revenue is an important thing, and colleges are no different. Colleges have a whole different situation with this, but sports coming back, and people use it as a criticism to say that it's because of money. It's absolutely because of money. There's no question about that.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean you can't do it safely. That's the issue with the NCAA. The NCAA, I mean, there's so many elements to this right now of their problems. I wonder if this could be a big step towards getting rid of college sports as we know it. The longer this goes and the more effect it has, I mean, college football is there to produce players for the NFL and make money. It's not about the college. College basketball, a little more about the college because you have the one-and-dones who leave and they're gone, but still not much. The other sports are a little different. The other sports, yeah, there's a professional component to it for other sports, but the revenues are not the same. The schools aren't making money on those. They're spending a lot more money than you would if it was a standalone business. If it was like a college soccer program. And this is why the U.S. women's national team is as good as it is. If college programs were run like independent clubs, there's no way they'd spend as much money as they do. They couldn't. They don't have it. They're spending more than they make. That's the case that's why they're called non-revenue sports. So if you had it that way, they wouldn't exist. Now, they exist because of football, and they exist because of the revenue, which is good, but you're going to see a change dramatically across the board. I mean, you know, we had talked about college conferences and what they would do. The Colonial Athletic Association, which, who all's in the CAA these days? I can't keep up with who's in what conference anymore.
In soccer or just in general?
Just in general, because they're doing this for all of what they call their Olympic team sports. It's non-revenue sports. Let's be real.
It's the George Mason, the GW.
Not tiny schools.
No.
Not big schools in terms of athletics, but not small schools either.
No.
They have adopted an innovative scheduling concept. That's what they call it. The EFM. They've even got an acronym for it. I mean, good grief.
They're thinking about it.
The Extreme Flexibility Model.
Extreme.
That's stupid. Designed to provide institutions with the opportunity to maximize cost savings relative to expenses associated with regular season travel. So what does that mean? They have to play a certain number of games to meet sponsorship requirements, sport sponsorship requirements. So whatever the minimum is in your sport, you have to play that number of games, no questions asked. You can schedule more if you want. That doesn't mean you have to play a conference schedule. That doesn't mean you have to play any conference games. That doesn't mean you don't play the same team 5 times. You can do whatever you want. That's what the CAA is doing for their non-revenue sports in the fall. Doesn't matter. Just whatever the minimum number of games you have to play to make sure that the sport is still active, that's what you got to do. Whatever you got to do that. That's it. They're going to have a conference tournament? I mean, they're saying they're thinking about it, but if you're going to do that, then you have to bring everybody in because nobody's playing a conference normal schedule. There's no reason to necessarily play in your conference. Period. So that's the reality here. That's where you're at.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say your men's soccer teams in the Colonial last year, NC Wilmington, Hofstra, James Madison, William and Mary Northeastern, Delaware, Drexel, Elon, and Charleston. And on the women's side, let's see if there are any other separate schools other than those 9. We have a little different. Hofstra, Delaware, NC Wilmington, Northeastern, Elon, James Madison, William and Mary, Charleston, Drexel, and Towson.
They're not going to play anything resembling a normal schedule because of the money. This could just dramatically change what college sports looks like going forward. That's why the conspiracy theory, which, again, is a valid one about college football programs saying, yeah, let's just go ahead and let people get sick now and then we don't have to worry about it during the season. It's going to do more damage across the board than they're thinking it will. From a perception standpoint, from a potential risk standpoint, long-term of people being okay with sports coming back. And it's going to cross over into other sports. So it's a nightmare. The college side of this is an absolute nightmare. The high school side terrifies me. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
The high school sports side of it, because they're not doing testing. They can't afford it.
Nope.
I mean, state of Georgia cut public school funding by $1 billion. Like, they can't afford to add the costs of doing testing. There's no way. So if they're going to play and they're planning on playing, I don't know how you guarantee anything.
Yeah, you've had one program who's already had athletes. I think it was an athlete test positive, so they shut down their pre-dead week workouts, and they're not coming back until July 7. When it comes to monitoring, it is literally take your temperature, answer a questionnaire, and then there are protocols that have been expanded over the last week or so. It started out in groups of 20, then it went to groups of 25. Now it's expanded to groups of 50, and then there's protocols for wiping down and making sure that things are as sanitized as possible.
It started out with what?
20.
You're
groups
not
of
doing
20.
Testing. It started out with groups of 20.
Including coaches. So if you have 2 coaches, it's 2 plus 18. And then it went to 25, I think, a week or 2 later, and now it's up to 50.
Like, there's no basis for any of those protocols. It all means nothing. You're just picking things out to try to sound like you're doing something. You can't, because you're not testing. You can't do anything because you're not doing the testing. So I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like, and that's really scary to me because you're going to have coaches, teachers, administrators at these schools who are at risk, and the kids are at risk too.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to have anybody that these kids come in contact with at risk as well because of it, and it's just I don't know. I don't know what can be done about it at this point because it feels like, just in general, a lot of heads being stuck in the sand about it. And I want to make it clear that you can do sports safely with a lot of restrictions and a lot of testing and a lot of protocols in place. But you can, just like restaurants can function with a lot of things in place to keep their employees safe and to keep customers safe. Just like factories and anything where there's a group of people who are working together, you can do things, but it's a different time than it was before this. So I'm not on the side that the virus is still out there, so you can't do anything. I disagree with that. I just don't think that's realistic.
Agreed.
But you have to embrace that you have to do things with a ton of restrictions. If you can't meet the restrictions, you can't do it. That's where the conversation needs to be. For me, it's not that Orlando has a lot of positive tests right now. You can't do events there behind closed doors. That's not true in my opinion, because you can do everything to not have that world in the bubble be anything to do with Orlando, the county, the state as a whole. Right. You can. That can happen. There's a lot of things that have to be done to make that happen. And the NBA and MLS are doing those things. The NWSL is doing it in Utah. The WNBA is doing this in Bradenton. All of these things are in place because it is hard to do things normally right now. It's a different ball game right now. But you can do it. That doesn't mean, just because you say you can do this doesn't mean stick your head in the sand, don't pay any attention to all the rest of it. No. You have to pay attention to all of it, and you have to adapt. And if this means MLS and the NBA need to put pressure on Disney to test their employees, so be it. I don't have a problem with that. If there are other things that can be done, and I don't know what they are off the top of my head, to mitigate any other kind of risk that can happen because of the outbreak in Orlando, okay, do it. But the plan in place is keeping you out of that environment. So that environment doesn't affect it. That's what's so hard about all this, is because it's not just a yes, no. It's not just a either or. There's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of elements to this conversation that have to be discussed. Because the flip side is this, and this is real, and this has to be understood. Businesses like MLS, because I've seen the question like, oh, they're just doing this for money, or they don't care about the athletes, or they can't play. If they care about the athletes, they can't play, et cetera, et cetera. The flip side's this. How many businesses have you heard of that lose $1 billion in a year and everything's hunky-dory and you just move on like nothing happened? I don't know of any.
Yeah.
I don't know of any. And I just don't think that's a reasonable expectation. Whole City, Whole City's not helping themselves right now, by the way. But their statement is accurate in that, people are flying off the handle about them not extending some players' contracts. So Hull City's supposed to have a secret stash of money that nobody knows about?
Right.
They have to make financial decisions. Can they handle it better? Yes. Should you ban your local paper from covering your team on site? No, that looks really stupid. But the idea that Hull City's treating its players terribly, Hull City might not have the money to function and sign those players back. That's a reality. You can not like it. You can say that, well, the owner's rich and that shouldn't happen. sports as a whole, not every owner is the same. MLS, not every owner is the same. Arthur Blank is very different than Jay Sugarman. Why do you think they got the Kevin Durant deal done now? Cash. Money right now. LAFC, why do you think they did the whole thing about the naming rights of the stadium? Cash. Why do you think they brought on a couple extra people in their ownership group? Cash. Operating cash right now, because you're not getting it from game day revenue. If you just say that because this is bad and this is scary and this is something that we have to be worried about, you can't function. What does that do to a restaurant? We've already seen it. A bunch of them have closed. What does that do to a retail place? A bunch of them have closed. A bunch of them aren't opening back up.
Yep.
That's real. You can like it or not, but that's real. And that means people lose jobs, and that means that things that you care about don't exist on the other side of this. Can these places function in a different way with restrictions to keep it safe and in a way that is responsible to their workers? And I'm being very general here because that's a player, that's a cook, that's whatever. Can they function in a way that is responsible? Yes. Can they keep the business moving forward and finding any kind of revenue that they can? Yes, they can. And the ones that have are the ones that are going to be better positioned to come out of this. But if you're going to say that sports can't operate, don't go to your local restaurant to get takeout either, because it's not safe for them. And don't go order stuff from the grocery store because it's not safe there. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, It's not different. You have to do it in a safe way. This idea that sports can't be safe is incorrect. It's incorrect. We're seeing it worldwide. But you also have to pay attention to how they're doing it and how important all those elements are. And if you don't, you're going to do what Clemson's doing and other schools are doing. I keep mentioning Clemson because it's the closest one, but it can be any college you want to say. You have to understand the responsibility that you have. If you're going to function, and this is where I love what the Bundesliga did, I love what Christian Seifert said throughout this. If you're going to do it, and if you're going to be allowed to do it, you have a massive responsibility. Because you have to show how to do it effectively to others. You have to model good behavior. You have a responsibility not just to your school or your team or just even your sport or your industry, but to society.
Mm-hmm.
And with what the college football programs are doing, it's reckless and it's setting a bad example. And they're not living up to the responsibility that they should have. MLS is living up to that responsibility by setting protocols in place and being very forthcoming with all of the information about it. The NBA is attempting to do that as well. There is a responsibility to do it, 100%. And you have to do a lot of things differently to do it right now, but it can be done. But you have to live up to that responsibility.
Katie Weaver, on a lighter note, did y'all see the dad joke segment from Atlanta United?
I did not watch it.
Not as good, not face-to-face, but the Frank DeBoer gag was pretty funny. Is the E.T. thing a joke around the training ground that we didn't know about? And she votes Larry for best overall delivery.
I did not see it. Jeff is definitely strong on the delivery of these. That's
what He is the master of the deadpan, without question.
Yeah.
But it's fun to watch him in these situations drop the hammer on a joke.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tafka and Chris Hutchison brought in some things as a part of the COVID discussion, and Tafka says he thinks it's been reported that individuals who've had it already can still contract it again, so the strategy wouldn't work.
I think it's not known. I think is maybe the best way to put that. Because, and the reason why I think that's the case is with the antibody testing, it's not like, okay, John, you got sick in March and you had it and you didn't know about it, and you go and do an antibody test and it shows up that you have antibodies. You don't have the same amount of antibodies as everybody else who got it at any different form. That part's been, I think, understood, is that people have different levels of antibodies. So if you got it, you might have very few antibodies. You might get sick again. If you got it, you might have a lot of antibodies, and you might not get sick again for a period of time. It's just not consistent. It's not like, oh, you had it enter your body in any form or fashion. You might have been asymptomatic. You might have been in the hospital, but you have the same amount of antibodies. I think we've seen enough on the antibody testing that it's not consistent across everybody who's caught it.
And Chris says, I'm guessing these are state figures. He has the median age of newly infected folks in Florida is now 35 compared to 58 for the week that began March the 8th.
Yeah, the governor talked about that. It's grown. I mean, because it's not rocket science, and yes, it's anecdotal, but people are going out. You know, I've seen pictures from people that I know who, not going out and being reckless, but people have driven by like strips where there's bars and there's people hanging out, and it just looks like a normal Friday or Saturday night.
Yep.
That's happening everywhere. So who are the people who go to those places? Generally younger people, so those numbers are going to come down. Now, the flip side of that is true, in that as a whole, that population has a lower risk for getting very sick. They can, in larger numbers, handle getting sick and not have a problem with it. They might be asymptomatic totally. They might have light symptoms. On rare occasions, they are going to get sick. But you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know. You can't say that, like, oh, well, yeah, across the board, if you are under this age, you are good. No worries at all. That's not how this works. So, yeah, those numbers going down, the average age going down, it's because more people are out. I mean, just a fact. I mean, I feel like where I'm at, and I live in the Virginia Highland area, and I kind of bounce around between, you know, Decatur and Midtown and Ansley Park and that area when I go to the store or whatever.
Yep.
I feel like I'm in an area where you're probably going to see more people wearing masks than on average, especially outside the perimeter or outside the metro area. Still not 100%. It's not. It's honestly not close, and it's gone down. It's gone down. I can only think of one day since people started wearing masks in any kind of normal numbers that I felt like the majority of people in the grocery store were wearing a mask.
Yep.
One day. And I mean, I go to the grocery store. I try to go twice a week. I probably end up going about 3 times a week on a typical basis, but it's just not happening very often. So these are real. I mean, these things are real. This thing's going to spread because people are going to get back to whatever they think normal is, and it's not going to be stopped at this point. So how do you function in a normal way? Because this country's not going to do what Italy did. They're not going to have a lockdown. I mean, it's just not going to happen. It's not very realistic. And even that was not a total lockdown because they still had grocery stores open and they had very small number of places open that had to be open. You got to eat. You got to be able to go to the pharmacy. These things are just real. But it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen here. So how do we do it? How do we function? We got to be careful. We got to be responsible. We got to follow protocols. We got to follow what's out there and best practices, because these things do work. There's enough numbers out there to show you that they do. You need to do them.
And I will say that I went to the store yesterday. Might have been 50% that were wearing masks. So suffice it to say, my speed through which I went through the store yesterday was accelerated more than normal.
I don't necessarily get faster. I just get more careful. I just have my head on a swivel more. And
that's the same thing. It's like, I mean, I'm boxed in a couple of separate ways, and I'm ducking into aisles and looking to see if there's anybody down the aisle, hanging out for a couple of minutes, looking behind me, making sure what's going on. I'm that guy in the store.
Yeah, it's the reality right now. Just got to be careful. What else do we have on Twitter? I know we got to talk about Tafka's opus. We'll talk a little more about it today. We'll probably try to get more in detail tomorrow.
Yeah, biggest thing is just a quote from Chris Hutchison. He says, quoting the outlaw Josie Wells, "Dying ain't much of a living, boy."
Nope, it is not. And you can't guarantee that that's not your outcome. You just can't. There's no way to do that. Bundesliga update. Their deal has been announced. 4.4 billion euro. This is domestic TV rights. Sky and DAZN went down from 4.6 in the last deal, and it's a 4-year deal. So a little bit less money, fewer partners involved. That's
5%.
where the Bundesliga is at.
Yep.
So if you've not checked out the website, Tafka has written another opus, and he has talked about promotion relegation this time, which is always a dangerous topic. I'll be curious to hear from him what kind of responses he has gotten from folks who have read it and shared some things to it.
Yep.
You said you had went through it. What are your questions?
Just a couple, and this is for Tafka clarification, or claritoffication, however you want to phrase it.
Okay.
He mentions the performance penalty for MLS teams to hand over to the USL side if the USL side finishes higher than them in the standings. Is that specifically per franchise, per conference, or is that per franchise in the overall for every team that finishes below you in points?
In general, because that's getting into the weeds. In general, Tafka is trying to create a hybrid promotion relegation system here in his opus, and you can read it at soccerdownhere.net. I think the very nature of trying to create the hybrid here makes it gimmicky, and that's why I don't think I don't think it would work, because I think we're seeing the league go to simpler, not more complicated. This is pretty complicated because of something like that, because you get down to that point of MLS teams wouldn't be relegated, USL teams could. It's basically like 50% you stay up. I don't know if that really changes anything. I think one of the assumptions that Tafka had in it was that having that format would bring in more media numbers, more media rights, more broadcast revenue. I don't think it would. I don't think it would, because yes, you would have the possibility of teams getting promoted from a large television market, but they're not paying those numbers out on possibilities. They would want to know that Tampa Bay is in the league, or they're not going to factor it in. So, like, the Rowdies getting promoted, you can't even factor in Tampa Bay's media market because they're not guaranteed to be in the league.
Right.
I think that's part of it. The money the $2 million to bolster a roster, the $2 million if you stay up, et cetera, where's that coming from?
That's another one of the questions I had.
That's where I always come back to with promotion relegation in this country, because it's always tied to money. It's not tied to money in every country. I think we hear so much about parachute payments and that idea. That's because of the TV dollars in England. And it was a negotiated point because of the Premier League breakaway. That was the trade-off. Was, okay, you guys want to break away from our league, the football league? All right, you're going to give us money, and you're going to do it this way. So promotion relegation is not, as a system, is not tied to money. In other leagues, in Argentina and Brazil and Colombia and Mexico, it's not tied to money unless there is some separation or it's negotiated in. So where are you going to come up with $8 million each year to bolster their roster, and then more money if they have a better record? Where's the money growth going to come from?
Yeah.
If you're going to be able to just convince MLS teams and owners to pony that up, that's fine, but figure that, how are you going to convince them? Because you've got a team like Real Salt Lake, for example.
Yeah.
Their revenues are reportedly around $20 million a year. They make money because they run a tight ship. But $20 million a year, you're going to give up $2 million?
10%? Nope.
It
tough.
doesn't. If you're gonna do promotion relegation, this is my thoughts on this. If you're gonna do it in this country, you're not gonna do it in a hybrid format. You're not gonna do it with a gimmick. You're gonna do it flat out across the board. And the only way you would do that is if MLS creates a second division and does it between their two divisions. And it is one entity that if you are right now up to 30 teams with the teams that are coming in, if you add another 10, if you add another whatever number, and you have two divisions, that's how you do it. You wouldn't get relegated out of that in that system. MLS would create a promotion relegation system in their business. USL has the ability to do that with the championship in League One, and they floated the idea that they would. No problem with that. I think that's great. But those are separate businesses. And you're not going to have promotion relegation in this country between two separate businesses. MLS would have to buy USL or have a number of teams come in, and then they would have promotion relegation in their league where all the revenues are being shared in a single entity format, which is the best way for promotion relegation to work. Because then you eliminate what's happening to a Portsmouth, what's happened to a Leeds over the years, what's happened to Bolton. You eliminate that because they're not cast to the winds of change over here out into the wilderness. They're still part of the business. They're just in the lower division. But they're still going to get the same share of TV revenue, all that. That's, with a lot of people talking about expansion fees and all these things. USL, it's been talked about. MLS has been talked about. You're growing the business by sharing it with more people. So that's the whole point of the expansion fee. The expansion fee goes up because you're expecting to make more money. And you have to dilute the business even more to share it. So I don't think any system you come up with, and Tafka, I mean, it's well thought out to try to find something that can make sense, but it's too gimmicky because if you try to explain this to your new soccer fan who is a new fan of Austin FC or a new fan of St. Louis or a new fan of Atlanta United, okay, I know what you're used to over here with the Falcons or the Hawks. I know what you're used to with the sports you follow, but this is how it's going to work. You're going to have this team come into the league, but they're going to get relegated next year if they're not ahead of the other team that came into the league in the conference. People's eyes are going to glaze over, and their eyes are going to roll back in their head, and they're going to be confused. If people were confused about two-leg playoffs, this is a whole nother step. And when it's confusing, you can't sell it as well. And the media that we talked about is such a huge need, especially the sports media. They're not going to get it, or they're going to scoff at it and trash it. Because that's happened for 50-plus years in American soccer. Oh, well, you're giving out points in the standings based off goals scored. I don't get it. I don't understand the table. I don't understand how you're doing your playoff format. I don't understand what the Open Cup is. I don't understand how your rosters work. I don't understand, so I'm just going to ignore it. That would be my fear of this. I think the only way you do it is if they're in the same business. It's just, I don't know where the money comes from. I think it's too hard to understand, and I think it would confuse too many people. And those are the issues that I would have with it from a big picture. I think if you're going to do it in this kind of format, the things that are put in here make sense. I just think the format as a whole is faulty because it's trying too hard to get somewhere that what's the gain? What do you gain by doing it this way? I don't know. Because I don't think there's a guarantee of more money, which is going to drive a business decision. I don't think there's a guarantee of more attention. I think actually you might limit attention because people would get confused by the format. I don't know what you get out of it other than just the idea that promotion relegation is a competitive tool that increases the intensity of a competition. It does, but this doesn't do that. This only does that for two teams in each conference. It doesn't affect the intensity of the competition for any of the MLS teams, and that doesn't solve the problem. So I just don't think it creates anything new and puts other things at risk. So that would be my concerns with it. I think if you're going to do it, you got to have MLS 1 and 2 and USL 1 and 2, and if they're completely separate, they're completely separate. And if a USL team wants to apply to join MLS, then you're down to the same things you are now. It's about money. It's about being approved. It's all of those elements. I really think that soccer around the world is coming more to what MLS is doing as opposed to MLS feeling like it has to copycat in their own way what other leagues around the world are doing. It's a different business model. It's a different market, and that's okay. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Pro-Rel in this kind of format doesn't solve anything. I don't think Pro-Rel in general is the thing that solves American soccer. Every country has soccer issues around the world, and a lot of them have promotion relegation. There's things that now are going to all be brought to the fore. I think, honestly, promotion relegation is even more risky right now in the coronavirus world than it was before. I mean, we've talked about it since the beginning of this. Like, teams getting relegated now are running a risk of being put out of business.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't think it adds to the conversation. I think it detracts in Tafka's format. And I think in general, right now, it's more risky than it was before. I don't think the benefits outweigh the negatives in general. I just don't think they do yet. Maybe they will. I think in MLS, if they did it amongst themselves, could it grow the competition? Yeah, it could. Could it raise the bar? Could it raise the intensity? Yeah. But that would not be the promotion relegation that people want. People want the romanticism of a team in the 8th tier getting promoted to the first division, but show me when that happens. Show me an example. Go ahead.
Yeah, the other concern that I have is the money that the USL teams would be getting upon promotion. Let's just say, and I was just burning through the standings trying to find a specific example, say like a Pittsburgh or an RGV, a Rio Grande Valley, make it through and they end up being a part of the promotion. Mm-hmm. Would they be financially able to work their way through an MLS season with an MLS budget, playing in the facilities that they're in? Would they have to relocate and play someplace else within their own city? Like Pittsburgh, we know Highmark is very, very small. We know that RGV's place is, in Harlingen, Texas, is very, very small. Would they have to relocate somewhat locally? Would they have to go someplace else that would be larger? That's another expense that they're having to look into. Just the overall expenses of being promoted that are added to this, or are you coming into a situation like we've seen in Mexico and sometimes with Liga MX teams who are like, we don't have the finances for it, we can't do it? That's a concern for me in this too.
Yeah, it has to be. I mean, RGV I think is fine. It's small, but I mean, you have CONCACAF games there. It'd be okay. Pittsburgh, I couldn't imagine an ESPN or FS1 national broadcast emanating from there and being what they would want to put on the air. That's definitely a concern. Tafka's coming back at a couple of things. I understand that MLS and MLS 1 and 2 is not... Well, it is pro-rel. Incorrect. It is a really big league. It is a close league. Absolutely. Yes, I completely and utterly get that. You have the newcomers to get it to MLS 1 and 2. I'm telling you from a business perspective, that's what the owners would want. Because why would you want the other? If you have bought into a team, you'd want some protection. I don't even know if they'd want MLS 1 and 2, because if you get bumped down to the second division, you wouldn't make as much. Right. Would you have a concern about that? Some would. But yes, it is promotion relegation, because promotion relegation, it's not about anything other than teams being elevated to the next tier based off of results and being lowered to the bottom tier based off of results. That's what it is. Yes, it'd be a really big league, but it would be a really big business. Tafka says that he disagrees about it being complicated, too complex. Yeah, with any pro-rel, people would have to take some learning and adjustment. Yeah, that's true. It's only as complicated as a fan's curiosity desires it to be. But that's the problem, Tafka. That's the part that I think you have to understand. If it's complicated, you're not curious. if it's too complicated to follow, you're not going to follow it. So if you come in the door and they try to explain this to you and your eyes glaze over, you're walking out the door. You're not going to pay attention to it. So TAM and GAM, absolutely. Like, TAM and GAM is complicated. That's why we spend so much time trying to make it not complicated so you can follow it, so you don't get frustrated and leave. That's why we do it. That's why others need to do more of that. But, yeah. This is different than player acquisition, though. A lot of fans don't get... You're a super fan. You know, we are super fans. A lot of fans don't get wrapped up in all the nuance of TAM and GAM and player acquisition and transfer market. They wait to see what happens and, okay, we got a new player. Okay, we sold a player. This is affecting the way the competition is run. That's different. That's a different layer of complexity. So, the Bolton, Tafka, I think you misunderstood my misunderstanding. I'm not saying the Bolton issue is a risk of this hybrid pro-rel. This, like I said, your system for pro-rel that you've created and laid out, that you can read at soccerdownhere.net, has a ton of protections to it. It is set up to try to protect business as much as possible. The Bolton issue would not happen in that. That's not what I said. I'm talking about promotion relegation as a whole. The Bolton issue could come up. Your system doesn't have that. I get that. I understand that. But your system has a lot of complexity to it that a traditional promotion relegation system doesn't have. You're in a country that has no history with promotion relegation, period. So any form of it's going to be hard for people to understand. And when people don't understand, they turn it off. I don't think this hybrid one protects the business. I don't think it creates more business. I don't think there's a justification for doing it other than just you want some form of promotion relegation. I don't know if promotion relegation people would like this system because it's not really a promotion relegation system. It is basically slotting 2 USL teams in each conference in each year, and they're not guaranteed to be the same teams. Actually, one team is guaranteed to leave each time. Does that help USL? I don't know how. I don't know how it helps them to just lose 8 teams. Or lose 4 teams, sorry. Is it 4 or is it 8? Did I mess up?
2 and 2. I think it's
4. Does it just help them to lose their 4 best teams? I don't know if it grows their business, but I don't think it affects it as much because their business needs to be more regionalized anyway. But it doesn't grow them. I think you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't necessarily need to be solved. So that's what I'm saying about it. I think you've come up with a good solution. Tafka, relax, my friend. I'm telling you about people not paying attention to the league at all because of the format, because I've seen it play out year after year. Well, how does this happen? I'll explain it to you real fast. The A-League in 1995 had the shootout system. If you had a draw, you had a shootout to decide the winner. The winner of the shootout got 2 points. The loser of the shootout got a point. If you won in regulation, you got 3 points. The table was confusing for me, and I knew that. Trying to figure out each game what you needed as you were coming down the stretch, the AJC stopped trying to explain it because you couldn't easily do it. And if the AJC is doing that, if local TV sees it and they're like, well, what do they have to do to get into the playoffs? They have to at least go to a shootout, but if they lose the shootout, it doesn't matter. If they get to the shootout, it's okay. If they get to the shootout, then the shootout doesn't matter because they got the point guaranteed. I can't do that in a 90-second segment. I'm out. That's how people don't pay attention. And we already have this problem with the media. Do you think ESPN or Fox or the newspapers or what have you would increase their coverage because of the system? I don't think they would. And you have to have casual fans. They would know the program. Tafka, I think you're getting a little defensive, and I understand. For a hybrid system of promotion relegation, this is what you'd have to do. I don't think it solves any problems. That's Tofka calling to yell at you.
It is. Yeah,
yell
really?
at me through you because he knows your number. I don't know if he does or not. It's just to create a hybrid system means that you understand that you can't do promotion relegation as a whole because of the business. I don't think this grows the business. I don't think this adds to the game. I don't think it necessarily detracts a bunch, but I don't think it adds anything. And there's some risk of it detracting some. I just don't think it solves anything. I don't think promotion relegation in this country is 100% necessary in any format right now. I don't think it would help grow the game right now at this moment. I don't. I know in the soccer world that probably puts me in the not cool category. That's okay. I've seen this business grow from nothing to what it is now. I've watched it. I think promotion relegation is a great competitive tool. I think it can increase the level of competition. It can definitely create an accountability for teams because they don't want to get relegated. But the business of the game in this country is not strong enough. The business of the game in England is not strong enough. And if it's not strong enough there, you have to question how it would be strong enough here because you have sad stories of teams who have been relegated. I know your system in this hybrid protects from that because we understand that that's an issue. But I don't think this hybrid or any form of promotion relegation grows anything in this country. I've heard Eric Winalda said it. He said it when he was still at Fox, that Fox would commit all these dollars to MLS if it had a promotion relegation system. But he also tied that to a different calendar, which I don't know if any of that would happen. That's speculation. If it would, then something to consider. But you've got to then, because these are the steps to do it in that way. I don't think the hybrid solves it. I don't think it does anything for USL. I don't think it grows the MLS business. If you want to do a full promotion relegation system, you've got to find a way to account for people that bought into the MLS that they bought into, and it's not that anymore. And that's just not easy to do. And when people ask, well, why is it this way? This is stupid. This is not what the Premier League is. Well, why is it that way? Go back and read when MLS was being created. You didn't have a league that was viable. You had to create it this way. You had to create it this way with cost sharing, with cost certainty, with salary cap, with single entity to get investment. Because you were 10 years when you started talking about MLS, you were 10 years after the North American Soccer League. And all anybody talked about was you can't run professional soccer in this country. Period. It ain't going to happen. Ain't going to happen. Everybody went out of business. Everybody said it was going to be a big sport. It's not. Can't do it. So they had to create something that protected their investors. And they did. And they've grown, and it's been very successful. I don't think you need to deviate from that just yet. I don't. I think when you do, you would do it in, a really big league. I think you would do it in an MLS 1-2 format if there are a number of other cities/investors that want to come in and be part of the league. They would want to be part of the league that's been successful. And they would buy into this rather than a risky component of, I'm going to buy a lower division team and then out the system so they can get promoted. I can keep pumping money into it. Because tell me where that happens in the world. It doesn't really. You might see a second division team get bought and money pumped into it. What Berlusconi's doing in Italy is probably the most bold example of this.
Yep.
Taking a team that I want to say they were in the fourth division. They were in the third this year, and they got promoted to the second. But he took money into a non-entity to get them promoted. Why is Amanda Stavely and her Saudi Arabian money buying Newcastle when they could spend a whole lot less and buy a third division team and then pump money in to get promoted? They don't want that risk. They don't want to do that. Even though it might end up being cheaper, it might end up being more expensive. They don't want the risk. They want the sure thing. MLS is constructed to be as sure of a thing as possible. This doesn't grow the money, and it adds confusion to it That's why I don't think it's a sellable thing to the MLS owners. I think your plan's the best way to possibly do it in this format. I just don't think the format is what would grow the league. That's all. And I don't think promotion relegation in general grows the league in this country. It would increase the competition level, but would it grow the business? And as we're seeing right now, you got to look at the business side. The business side does drive it because you don't have a competition level if you don't have the business. So, I don't know. I think it's a creative way of looking at it. And if you had a partnership with MLS and USL or a investment from MLS and USL, maybe it changes the paradigm a little bit. Maybe it changes the conversation. But I don't think it does enough to grow the business of either league involved in it yet. The federation would have to tell them they have to do this, and they can't, really. You know, a lot of people on the pro rel side point to that. Just the federation should do it this way. Well, it's what Werner Ficker talked about when the U.S. got the World Cup in 1988. We're going to start a nationwide league. It's going to have all these tiers, and everybody. I've seen multiple people on the pro rel side point to that. See, they were going to do it. Why didn't they do it? There was no interest. There was zero interest because you were going to take the 10 or 12 pro teams that existed and combine them with a bunch of amateur teams that are still amateur. And it didn't work. You had to do it in the way that MLS did it because you had to be big. Tofka, it's cool. We disagree. It's all good. Don't worry, man. I know you explained why. I disagree. That's all. It's okay. That's why we have these conversations. I think the number one thing out of this is a full version of promotion relegation would not work in this country. I don't see how it would across a lot of different factors. If you're going to do it, you're going to have to come up with a different version of it. And I don't think a different version of it gets what people want out of promotion relegation. I think the speculation in any of this would be that by having this, it would grow the revenue of the league. And I don't think there's any way to guarantee that. I just don't buy that in general because where is that revenue coming from? Are there companies sitting out there right now in the United States that say, I'm not going to invest in MLS until they have some form of promotion relegation because that's what they do in other countries? I don't think they're out there. I don't know who they are. I don't know. Tofka, I'm going to leave it at this because we've already went 30 minutes over. The profit comes from the TV revenue of the 18-plus markets that become relevant by the system. Why do you disagree with that? Because they don't. They're not part of the system. They could be part of the system. There's no guarantee that they are. Tampa Bay Rowdies could stink and be bad for every year of this and not ever get promoted. The TV company's not going to spend money on a possibility that Tampa Bay could be part of the TV footprint. And they might only be part of it for a year. They might be part of it for 10 years. Who knows? But there's no guarantee of that. It's not going to bump the numbers up. It's not. Now, the way that all those numbers would go up is if you had either a bigger league or they're all part of a business and you do what other multi-tiered businesses have done in soccer. That's why Bundesliga 1 and 2. That's why the football league with the championship, League 1, League 2. You're sharing TV revenue across all those levels in your business. That's why leagues do that. La Liga 1 and 2. That's why it's set up that way. The possibility of a team being part of it doesn't affect it. It doesn't. It's about, are they part of it? So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Amazon would say that, well, we'll pay more because we think that Tampa Bay Rowdies could get promoted. I don't think that's how they do business. I don't think they would do it on the chance. Anything else?
I don't think you bet on the come. I think that right now, especially, you're betting on what's there in front of you.
Yeah, and especially now.
And you can't put money at something that might happen. You're dealing in absolutes, and I think that we would see a pro-rel model in USL involving Championship and League One before we would see anything involving MLS.
Oh, well, no, that's different because it's the same business. And then you're doing your TV deal in USL is across the board.
Yes.
Your $1 million a year or so that you're getting from ESPN, that's across the board. That's being shared equally among everybody because it's all equal. Maybe League One gets a little bit less because they don't have any of the games on the ESPN platforms over the air. Maybe they get a little bit less. I don't know. But they're getting something from it because they have the ESPN Plus package. If you had MLS and USL all go in together on a TV deal, that's a different conversation.
Yes.
Because then you're factoring it in. Now, there might be levels of difference and all of that. I don't think the interest would... Okay, Tafka said, that's where we disagree. I think interest will blossom by the accessibility to MLS, not the guarantee of promotion. The reason I don't think that is partially the landscape's changed, as we see in Germany today. They got less money, not because of possibility of accessibility of markets, because there's less money to spend. I don't think you're going to get more money, period, right now. Now, by the time MLS goes into this conversation, maybe an Amazon has money and wants to focus on the United States. Maybe there is another TV partner that wants to buy in. Maybe CBS, for example, who is now into the game. Maybe things change by the time MLS has that conversation in 2022. Hopefully it does. But right now, I don't think there's going to be more money anywhere in any format for TV, for MLS, for USL. I don't think it exists. In the current format or in a new format. I don't think it does. I don't know. I'd like to see some form of promotion relegation for the competition aspect, but you can't let that overpower the business. And I think the business has to be the number one thing because we're 25 years in. We're not the 100-plus years in other leagues around the world. It's 25 years in. You go back and compare in American sports where the NFL was 25 years in, where Major League Baseball was 25 years in, compare the National League and American League separately, the NBA, NHL, all of it. It's still a baby. It's still really young. It's still on shaky footing, and now that's all changed. That's all changed. So now you have to be even safer. So I think the way to go right now, if you demand promotion relegation in any form, I think USL would really benefit from it, but you're going to have to reconcile on smaller numbers teams that have bought into the championship that could get relegated to League One. It's a smaller investment, but it is an investment. They didn't buy a League One team. They bought a championship team. They paid $10 million. They could have paid $1 million to buy into League One. They didn't. They paid 10. Do they get some of that money back to them? Now, USL is owned by an entity. They can pay some of the expansion money back. They can pay some league money back. They can do some things. MLS could do that, but they're not going to do that for a team that's leaving their league. They're not going to do that for a team that's not a full member of their league. That's part of it. MLS would have to get a lot more money out of this to make that money go to USL and also profit on themselves. I just don't know if that's there right now. Maybe it will be in 10 years. Maybe it'll be there in 20 years. Right now, I think you're not doing anything that's risky at the moment. And the sure thing is adding expansion teams. And you've already got that sorted out. You've already got teams coming into 30. It's a good thing you did it when you did. I don't know what the market's going to be for expansion teams after coronavirus. I just think everything's changed. Even if this was a good idea 6 months ago, I don't know if it is now because we're in a different world. Maybe that's coloring my opinion on it to a degree. But go read this. Go read it at soccerdownhere.net. Dig into it. Think about it. And think about things you like and things you don't like about it and what you would do about it. Because that's how these things get brought up. That's how ideas come. That's how new developments happen. It gets discussed. I don't think any idea like this that we've seen in pro sports was nailed on take one. It doesn't. MLS went through so many different iterations. The NBA, NHL, NFL, all of them adjusted their business practices as they went because they learned and they developed, and things changed outside of their control. So read it, look at it, interact with Tafka, MAYEWJ9, and you'll see him on our Twitter at Soccer Down Here. Interact with it. Make it better. Things you like, tell him. Things that you don't like, tell him. And he'll go back and forth with you, and maybe it'll adjust it. Maybe this will be an Opus 4.5 here at some point, and there'll be some adjustments to it. We'll see. We'll find out. But this is how you figure things out, by talking through them. So,
yep.
Tafka, don't be mad at me, man. I just disagree with you on this, and I probably disagree more than anything because of this virus that's wrecking the business of the game around the world. So I'm more conservative on crazy business ideas right now because I think you have to be really careful at the moment.
Yep.
But maybe it'll be different soon. I hope so. We will keep an eye on everything related to MLS testing, NWSL announcements of rosters coming out later today. We will have on some platform an NWSL preview of the Challenge Cup at the end of the week. And we will have our evening show tonight to talk about all this and more, 7 o'clock. So, thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for tweeting at us. Thanks for having the conversation with us this morning. Y'all have a good one. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, y'all.